Senator from Edgefield, for what purpose you rise?
I ask to be heard.
Senators recognized and be heard on the nomination.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone watching. Those of you who are watching on television or maybe on the internet, you can't tell. We got a big crowd in here today. That's good. The Lieutenant Governor's a popular person. And just before I get started, let me talk just for a minute about yesterday. Because the Lieutenant Governor and I haven't had an opportunity to talk about this yet. But I will tell you, and there was some, and maybe I'm divulging some things from a caucus meeting that I shouldn't divulge, Mr. Leader, but I'm going to divulge it a little bit anyway. But we had some conversations among our caucus yesterday, and there were a couple people who expressed some interest in maybe being a candidate for that position. One person in particular thought really long and hard about it. And I thought that if one of our own asked to have a day to think about it, that he ought to be afforded that opportunity. I don't think it was asking too much. Heck, I could count several situations just this year when folks, especially on this side of the aisle, have asked that let's not vote on this issue today. Let's vote on it tomorrow. The selection of a lieutenant governor is a whole lot more important than that. Someone wanted a night to think about it. I think we owe them the opportunity to think about it. That was all there was to it. I didn't have any other motive behind that. But I wanted to make sure the lieutenant governor understood that. There was certainly no malice, certainly nothing personal towards him. So that's that. You know, I know a little about the history of the Senate. I don't know nearly as much as what I should. I don't know nearly as much as what some of you know. Because I know obviously there have been some who've been here for many years, longer than I have. And then there are even those who are pretty good historians who have not been here as long. I do know, though, that historically, the President pro tempore has also served as either the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee or as chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Then again, the Senate has historically been very pale in color and overly full of testosterone. Deals were made in secret. Votes were not publicized. Sessions certainly weren't broadcast over the internet or television. And fortunately, in some of those areas, we've made some significant improvements. In the days of yore, those backbenchers, they stayed in their seats and they kept their mouth shut. Those were the good old days, right? But despite that historical precedent for the chairman of the two major committees being president pro tem, I think it's a bad idea. I think it is a really bad idea. It is the consolidation of way too much power in one individual legislator. It's just too much. And though you may not agree with me publicly, privately, nearly everyone in here shares that same belief. The chairman of the Senate Finance Committee controls the checkbook. We all know that. And the many appointments that come with that position. Chairman Leatherman is also chairman of the Joint Bond Review Committee. And these days, heck, they get to sign off on just about everything. He's on the State Transportation Infrastructure Bank. He's on the Budget and Control Board, and he's going to continue to serve on that board until it expires. But then he will continue to serve on the successor, to my dismay. He is the chairman of the Operations and Management Committee. Essentially, y'all, he gets to sign off on all the salaries of all the employees in this body, the staff members. And actually, as we get to talk about in a little bit, even what the members of this body make. Who knows what else that the senator from Florence is actually a part of. Now, I don't criticize any of that stuff. I think that's fair. But I think by almost any definition, the senator from Florence is already clearly the most powerful legislator in the State House. He may very well be the most powerful elected official in the state. And now we're about to add to that the power of the President Pro Tem. Now, the power of the President Pro Tem by itself really isn't all that much. Right? The President Pro Tem by itself, well, you get some, I think the most significant powers there are the appointment powers. You have appointments to all types of boards, commissions, committees. Obviously, you get the conference committee appointments. There are a few Senate rules that the President Pro Tem is able to exercise that other members of the body cannot exercise. For instance, one of us can be up here in the middle of a debate. The President Pro Tem can stand up and move to carry over. He's the only one who has that authority. That's a big power. You combine all those things together, it is way too much power to put in the hands of any one legislator. And again, I say, everyone knows that. Now, the irony of this is, and when I think about it, I kind of chuckle a little bit, that what we're talking about here, who we're talking about is the primary critic of only having one set of eyes on something. The champion of saying that we have to have multiple sets of eyes because we need somebody looking over the shoulder. And yet what we're about to do is we're about to consolidate all this power into one person. I think it's dangerous. Now, I don't say this because it's Senator Leatherman. I've told Senator Corson that if he were chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, I don't think it would be good for him to be President Pro Tempore. I had the same conversation with Senator Peeler. I said, and the way the conversation went, and forgive me for being so informal, but I said, Harvey, if you were chairman of Senate Finance, I'd really have a hard time with you as President Pro Tem because it's too much power to put in one person. In all candor, I had the same conversation with Senator Martin because I think that the Judiciary Chairman position is a very important position. Now, it is not nearly as powerful as the Senate Finance Chairmanship, but it is a powerful position. As I told Senator Martin, if I had my preference would be that the President Pro Tem not be the Chairman of Judiciary or the Chairman of Finance. Now, if I've got to pick between the two of them, I pick the Chairman of Judiciary, regardless of who the person is, because I think that's way too much power to put in one person. And I think, again, I think we all know that. Now, the President Pro Tem position is actually one of the few leadership positions that we get to vote on. Nearly everything else is done by seniority, or at least seniority within a party, right, Senator? But it's done by seniority. Other than electing our respective caucus chairmen, this is it. This is when the body comes together to select who our leader will be. Now, I think there are other things that come into play at that point. You know, on nearly every vote in this body, the senator from Florence and I are together. If you look at the percentages of the votes and how they break down, we're on the same team. Heck, for that matter, probably 75% of the votes, probably all of us are together, right? And if you exclude the few times when my friend from Spartanburg over here finds something in legislation that none of the rest of us see, hey, we're probably together about 90% of the time. Because on many situations, he may be the only no vote. But occasionally, it doesn't happen all that often, but occasionally we have some contested votes. And on those contested votes, they typically are the most important issues of the day. And on those contested votes, it seems that more often than not, the senator from Florence and I are on different sides. difference of opinion, as he often says, and that's fine. I understand that. I'm not being critical of the senator's voting positions. I'm not criticizing anyone else's voting positions. But again, here's the thing. We're about to select the president pro tem. We're about to select our leader. And from a philosophical perspective, this is an especially bitter pill for me to swallow. This is an especially bitter pill for those of us who have been working to modernize and to reform state government to swallow. I don't mean this at all to be personal. This is about the issues. And here, the senator's position on the important issues of the day makes it impossible for me to support his nomination as president pro tem. From a philosophical perspective, my biggest issue on the budget every year, is that if we have it, we are going to spend it. Sure, we're going to save what the Constitution requires us to save. We're going to refund what the law mandates that we refund. But dadgummit, man, if there's some discretion, we are going to spend that money. We will find something to spend the money on. I think that's a poor way to govern. I think it's irresponsible budgeting. And when we've made attempts to rein in that growth, just to slow it down a little bit. The senator from Florence has been the first person to smack us down. Almost nearly as frustrating is the secretive process in which the budgets are made. If you're a subcommittee chairman over there on finance, you've got a little bit of an idea of what's going on in your area. But I don't think anyone really has a good idea of what's in the budget except for the chairman. I think that's dangerous. This isn't some little road naming bill. It's the budget. We ought to have full disclosure and a full and open debate about what's in it. Now, that became especially evident to me just a few years ago. We're here on the floor. The subcommittee chairman come up to this podium. They make their presentations about the amount of money that they had for their particular subject area and all the great things that people were doing in it and what we wanted to do generally. And then one person stood up and asked a question. And then the snowball came. There were lots of questions that started to be asked. And the response, almost to a man, was a blank stare. Because when you started asking specific questions, not everyone knew the answers. In fact, only one person knew the answer. And then this year, this has been gnawing at me for the last few weeks. The conference committee on the budget. Oh, wait a second. There wasn't a conference committee on the budget. There was a two-person conference committee. Chairman of Ways and Means and the chairman of Senate Finance. There was a conference committee of two on the largest state budget in history. There was no way, y'all. There was no way that more than 2 or 3 people in this body had really any idea what was in that budget when it came back from the House. There's no way. And I submit, unless you've been reading the newspapers, you probably still don't. For the past 3 years or so, I've spent a good bit of time at this podium fussing about deficits and the shadow government that is the Budget Control Board. We had a strong bill a couple of years ago to strike an attack at that monster. The senator from Florence was our main obstacle. Now, I understand he had some well-held positions on that, but he was our main obstacle on that. We got the bill out of committee last year, and we get some kind of maneuvering for the first time to send a judiciary bill to finance. Now, this bill had gone through Judiciary Committee several times before over previous sessions. Not once had there been an attempt to send it to another committee. But the folks on Judiciary did too good of a job on it. We had to have a lot of set eyes looking at it. Now, we got lucky because we had some folks over on finance who were fair, and we had some folks on finance who wanted to do some reforms. And this, of course, is when we really start hearing about the importance of having multiple sets of eyes looking at things, and how terrible it would be if we only had one set of eyes looking at the important functions of government. I have to note that irony again because it is, to me, it keeps coming back to me today. But in any event, we got a bill. We got a good bill. Now, it wasn't as good as it could have been, wasn't as good as it should have been. And that was because of the senator from Florence's objections. If you look at the vote that we had here last year to allow for the superintendent of education to be appointed by the governor, required a 2/3 vote. We came real close. We missed it by only 2 or 3 votes. Everybody in here knows that that was because of the senator from Florence. We had efforts both last year and this one to use some of our very large surpluses. We had a very good budget year last year. We had a very good budget year this year. We had surpluses. We had efforts to try to use some of that money to put it towards what everyone has to recognize are some very real challenges with our roads and bridges in the state. We got a little over $100 million last year out of that, but good grief, the moaning and groaning that came with it. None this year. Now, I want to be perfectly candid. That's certainly not because the senator from Florence doesn't want to fix the roads. To the contrary on that, he's been an outspoken advocate on that issue for years. We just have a fundamental difference, a fundamental philosophical difference about how that should happen. The senator's first look is to a tax increase. For many of us, that is the last option. Now, again, I don't fault him for his position on his votes. I don't fault him for the attempts to maintain the antiquated system of government that's allowed him to accumulate the significant amount of power that he has. I don't fault him for those things. Look, we all get to vote how we feel is best. We all got to represent our districts. I get that. But these votes to me were big-time votes. These really mattered. Now, I do fault him for what I really see as a backdoor exclusive way of making decisions, and I fear that that will continue. My point here is that we're asked, really we're being forced to select a new leader of this body. And I can't in good conscience support someone whose philosophical views are that contrary to mine. I can't help but feel like we're moving back to a time long past when very few had input in the decisions that were being made. I think we're taking several steps backwards. Now, I understand that, particularly on this issue, that there are lots of people in here who think differently. We have differences of opinion. We have folks who have different philosophical beliefs. I get that. Although I think many senators, and especially some of my Democratic friends, you're also basing this decision on philosophy. I get that. Now, to be sure, he has the checkbook. That matters. I understand that too. We won't talk about that individually in public, but we all know that's part of the deal here. He's got the checkbook. I get that. And he's proven he's not afraid to use it. But from a philosophical perspective, could y'all get a better choice? For the life of me, though, regardless of the philosophical differences, I don't understand how anyone can just sit there and allow for the secretive deals to take place that all of us know are happening. Regardless of where you sit, this is the Senate, for crying out loud. As a senator from Darlington often reminds me, and I hate to call you out, I apologize for that. I was determined I wasn't going to call anybody out. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but as a senator from Darlington often reminds all of us, I'm a senator too. And I think on something as important as the budget, I think we all should demand to be part of that process. Now, there's another area that I want to hit. And this is probably the most disturbing part of the whole thing to me. And I understand there are some folks in here who disagree with what I'm about to say. I've got several friends in this body. I have just a few very close friends. And I know I have a very close friend who disagrees with me on this. But I am convinced that this was a well-orchestrated coup. It was a hit. Now, I've been hearing some of these conspiracy theories for a while, and I just kind of laughed them off. But then all the pieces started falling into place. And it really seems like that what got the ball rolling was that research university bill. Senator Corson, being the obviously unfair guy that we all know that he is, dared to have that House bill go through the normal committee process. And when Corson balked at the request to put that bill in the legislative fast track, I'm convinced the plan was hatched. Now, I don't know where the plan came together. I don't know that it all came together at the same time. But there was clearly an effort to circumvent not only the chairman of that committee, but also the president pro tem. Senator Corson said no. We'll show Senator Corson. Without even the decency of mentioning it to the chairman of the committee, the move comes to pull the bill out of committee, to go around him. Now, I understand wanting to make the move. If you've got something, those motions come up occasionally. But doing it in a clearly orchestrated manner, Senator Peeler, you were standing up right there. Every other time the motion period comes up, the man looks right at you. And he says, "A senator from Cherokee," except this time. And it was a complete surprise to this man. And then the real pressure comes. The lieutenant governor has to go be president. Now, we all knew that was coming at some point. And I think probably all of us are glad that he has that job. I'm glad he has that job. I think he'll be a terrific president of the College of Charleston. What we didn't expect was just how much pressure then was going to be applied to the president pro tem. This suggestion all over the press, all in the newspapers, that somehow Senator Corson just doesn't care about the constitutional order of things. All of this was a not-so-veiled hit on John Corson because he dared to say no. Then we have the move to succeed him, where we are now. Now, I absolutely believe, and I think the senator from Florence would probably concede this, that he's had his eyes on the position for a while, longer than just a few weeks. But that research university bill gave him the opportunity. And the phone calls started, especially last week, soliciting votes to be the next pro tem. Now, I laugh about this some. I've joked with some folks. I didn't get one of those calls. I know that doesn't surprise anybody. I may be the only person in here who didn't get one of those phone calls. But I'm not offended by that. As I told somebody earlier, I earned that one. Right? I'm not at all offended by that. I am, however, a little bit offended that Senator Corson didn't get a call until after the votes were locked up. I don't think it's decent. We've heard a lot of talk already today about how great of a body this is, how collegial we are, how we work together, how it's a family. That was indecent. Folks, I'm almost finished.
For what purpose do you rise, Senator?
I'm not going to raise a point. I just want to as a courtesy, I hear what the senator is doing.
I understand the rule.
But the characterizations, I don't want to have to raise a point, but I think that we're getting close, Senator.
I understand. Folks, I am convinced, again, it was a coup. It all started like a funny conspiracy theory. Then we had the drones flying over outside, which kind of made it all kind of funny too. But then everything fell into place. But today, with the vote that we're about to take, to have the senators from Richland and Florence switch seats, I think this body sanctions the coup. I think we say it's okay. I think that's exactly what we're saying. I think we're accessories to the hit. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, let this be a warning. Play ball or there will be consequences. Just ask Senator Corson. Now, I'm almost finished. There a couple other things, because I talked to a lot of people over the last week too. And there were a couple things a couple specific points of criticism of Senator Corson that I heard several times. One of them was, and I kind of laughed at this, one of them was that Senator Corson talks to Republicans too much. It's a terrible thing for you to do, Senator. It's interesting, though, because former Senator Glenn McConnell, when he was pro tem, he talked to everybody. But somehow, and I heard this from more than one person, that Corson acted too much like a Republican. Shudder the thought. I don't know how anybody could possibly say that Senator John Corson was not fair to everybody. Anytime there was a request, he took heat on our side because there were folks thought that he was too easy on the Democrats. And I heard multiple times that he coddled the Republicans. Here's what I think is behind that, Senator. And I don't even know whether you heard that criticism, but here's what I think was behind that. 2 years ago, when the race for President Pro Tem was between you and the senator from Cherokee, I think that many people thought they were getting somebody they could control. And you didn't prove that. And I think that rubbed people the wrong way. And I think that is the origin of that criticism. Now, here's another one that I've heard. I've heard that there is too much lack of decorum in this body. I've heard there's no leadership. There's no discipline. We got to right that ship. We can't have too many senators thinking for themselves and acting on their own. We got to have somebody who's going to step up and solve all of our problems for us. We got to have some strong leadership. If you hear nothing else that I say today, hear this. Let this be a warning. If you're looking for strong leadership, you're about to get it. Members of the body, I appreciate you tolerating me for a little while. I didn't have any intention when I came up here of talking forever, although I admit I was tempted, because I think this decision is that big. But the consolidation of power that I talked about is extremely concerning to me. Many of you have been through previous President Pro Tems who've also been in similar positions. I didn't see that, but this one concerns me. And I just cannot in good faith support it.
What purpose, Senator Cherokee Rice?
I asked